in. Hi, Grant. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, and you're live on the stage right now. So you may want to reshare your screen,
Sure.
I think, and then you should be ready to go.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Elizabeth Joyce, and I am here with my partner, Brittany Butler, who is a former media specialist that I used to work with together back in our McMichael High School days. But we are now going to be talking about science and lit circles coming together. Our title is Sci plus Lit equals Chemistry. And if you are in the session with us, we have a bit.ly here that we would love to share with you. I'm going to place it here in the chat. Feel free to click it. And it should make a template for you to have where you can type all kind of notes that will help you as we continue this journey together, discuss lit circles using science and ELA. Brittany, do you want to say anything to introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, so I'm Brittany Butler. I have a different position. I used to be in the role of media coordinator, and now I support media coordinators. And I've worked with fabulous teachers in the past and continue to do so, like Miss Joyce here. And so Elizabeth and I have worked together for quite some time, both at the high school level and now at the middle school level. And so hopefully you can get some great ideas today and pick up some of the tips that she has, but also maybe borrow the format for the template and some great things to do today.
All right. Thanks, Brittany. So I am teaching right now 8th grade ELA and social studies here at Western Rockingham Middle School in Rockingham County. And I also have been partnering with my science teacher to talk a little bit more about how to use literature in the classroom to cover some science topics. So if you're on this document with us, and you come down to the first row, we have what does it look like in your classroom lit circles. So we have 4 links here to some examples of some things that we're going to try to use this year with the science classroom and the ELA history classroom. And the first link is called the Radium Girls. So if you click that, you're able to see, and please don't be alarmed by all the standards. It's just that when you do different types of project-based learning, you cover a lot of standards. The first one is Radium Girls by Kate Moore. And this is a playlist that I have been working on. It's pretty much finalized, but I have been talking with the science teacher. And if you look carefully, you'll see the PS 8.1.2 and here at the bottom PS 8.1.3, which are standards that we're using now with our new science curriculum. So if you scroll down, there's all different kind of hyperlinks you can use. This example came from Dr. Catlin Tucker, who I really like to use her material because she teaches a lot with blended learning. This video, I would not waste your time watching that unless you really want to. It's a video of me giving directions to students about how to use the playlist. So again, if you're not familiar with this, if your students have never used this before, you definitely want to do probably both going over it together, but also making a video of you for those who are absent or maybe need to listen again as they are now performing lots of different tasks in this playlist. Coming on down, we have like an introduction. And so I just gonna let them know that we're talking about radiation and the element radium. There's a Padlet to answer. I also provided the students with a parking lot. So if you click that link, you'll see a Google Doc where students can ask questions, and students and myself, plus any other teacher who's helping, such as a media specialist or the science teacher, can give feedback as well. Because again, we only learn from each other. Then it tells you what to read, and the students can take notes as they go, followed by one of our resources that I like to use, and I think Brittany has as well, Wonderopolis, where you can actually learn about things and be curious about things. So we found links to articles that had to do with this topic. And it just goes from there. This teacher time in yellow is just to kind of pause. So when students are working, that lets them know, come see me. So when they get to that point, I don't want them to go too far in the activities without getting some kind of feedback from me. So this is a chance to come to something like a table, kidney-shaped table, or a small group table, and have some feedback time with the teacher. And that can be one-on-one, or it could be with partners or a team, just depending on how you have this set up. But again, you can take a look at this. It just goes from there, YouTube videos with questions, a Canvas quiz they'll take, the science connection will be making a model, and again, another teacher time. So this kind of breaks down how we'll read the book. And again, I would say you could do this really for any kind of activity, not just books.
Mhm.
So that one is the Radium Girls. Okay, so the next one is Blackbird Girls. So when you come to this one, I don't know if you all are using right now Diffit, but our county here in Rockingham purchased this, so we're now using this. This is really helpful to kind of give you an idea of some different things you can do. Now, right now, this example is pretty heavy on the ELA side, but you can definitely use more science standards if you like to. So my science teacher could pull in things that she wants to make sure are covered on her classroom while I'm doing the ELA here in mine. But again, this is like a summary. It gives you major points, vocab, and if you wanted to, as a teacher, you could remove any of this, and also you could have, besides an example sentence, I could add a column if I prefer, and say type your own. Then you got multiple choice questions, and then students can highlight their answers here. Then followed by short responses, where they have to actually give a little bit more than just an ABC type answer. And then they have a open-ended questions, which I know kind of drives my students a little nuts, but they've got to practice, you know, thinking about the connections to things about themselves and the world around them. All right, Sugar Changed the World is another Diffit. Now this one is a Google slide, so you can use this. On this one, I use the answer site explain because it is informational text. So students can look at this picture here and do kind of a wonder, like what do you notice, what do you wonder here as an intro. And then it just goes from here. Here's some vocabulary words they need to know, use it in a sentence, give an image to represent it. And then they're going to read this part about sugar and take notes on the side. And then it just has more information like questions to follow, that type of thing. So again, you can always tailor the Diffit any way you would like. You don't have to always use a slide or a Google Doc. You can even edit it as you go if you don't like a certain aspect of it. I know you're using Diffit with other teachers. Anything you want to add about Diffit so far?
If we have an opportunity in a little while, it might be a great idea to take a look at all the resources that you can get from it and all the different input methods,
Sure.
not just a topic into the AI tool.
Okay. So, good point. This one is Peak. This one's just a Google Doc. This is just showing you a choice board. Again, your choice boards can look a lot of different ways. This one's just basically doing things on the ELA level, such as character map, theme, diary entry, book trailer. It's giving students a chance to do different type of assignments with this particular book. Again, we can use Diffit. We could use another AI tool. We could just do old school questions and discussions and even Socratic method if we wanted to with this book. All right, so let's see. Let's go on to Diffit for a moment. If you haven't seen Diffit, so when you come in, you're going to want to sign in.
You do have a access to the premium subscription for a limited amount of time. In our county, we did purchase the upgraded version, but there are a lot of free options available for you also. And I think they have sponsored or specific
Yes.
resources like for limited time within that time frame also?
Yeah, I want to say when I signed up the first time before the county bought it, I want to say I at least had a month. I feel like I had
May have been
several,
longer.
it might have even been longer than that. I just remember I had several weeks of opportunity to make things before our county bought it. The main thing is you see here when you're signed into your account that you make is, I like the literally anything. You can look for literally anything, or you can look for an article or a YouTube link. So some of you that might have a resource on YouTube, you could use that video as your starting point. Or again, if you read an article somewhere, you could connect that. If you have a text or PDF, you could use that option as well. And then of course, a vocabulary list. So if I pick a topic or theme, you got an idea, Brittany?
What's something you've been teaching lately?
Oh my, we've been teaching, I had that unit test and study sync, so I could do something with illusion. All right, illusion in, I'm gonna say The Lottery by Shirley Jackson.
The other thing that you can notice while Elizabeth is typing right there is you have some options to customize your resources too. So maybe you need things at a different reading level for different students. So there's an option to do that. You can also change your language. We've been working with some teachers that work with ML students just recently. And so they are able to format that into a different language for them. And then there's also a choice there for informational text versus fictional. I believe,
Correct. So I'm gonna come down here and I'm just gonna pick my grade level and I'm just gonna say 8. Language is English. Do I want informational text or fiction? And this is of course a fiction story. Hit generate, and it just takes a few seconds and it's pretty quick in creating something. And then what I like is the choices you have. So again, if you're doing all kinds of different books in your classroom, you can make things be tailored to you. Okay, so this picture here looks like the town kind of getting together as they're getting ready to have the vote to stone people. I could pick this image in case I want this instead, or I could pick this from the video from the 1960s, early 70s. But again, if you come down, besides picking the picture you like as your intro, see how you can adjust the length. You can edit this adaptive reading passage. You can copy this for any reason. Coming on down, they always give me a summary and then key vocab words. I can add words. I can add images to help them with the words. Then multiple choice. I can see the answers. I can add questions. And I would just say, as a good educator, just make sure you look at the questions and look at the answers, because sometimes it might not be a question you want to ask. It might be too obvious, or it might be really vague, depending on what, again, point you're trying to make with this particular reading passage. Short answer and then open-ended prompts. So once you make this, you come over here and you pick your resource. So you can look at any of these, they pop up for you, or you can hit the green button and it will generate even more. So if I click this, I even have now more options. And I don't want to spend a lot of time here because we can spend an hour just looking at this. But as you can see, it gives you all these different options here as you are creating different activities with the text that you would like to read, whether it's fiction or whether it's informational text. That's completely up to you.
And as we always say with AI, we definitely want to review it
For sure.
and evaluate and make sure that we modify it for our students in our classrooms.
Correct. Okay, so I'm coming back here. So that was our first row. So again, please feel free to take notes on the document that you've copied for yourself. Because again, those are just some examples of some of the things that we're going to be doing. And those are some of the books that we have purchased here at my school for our lit circles. Because again, the science teacher said there were elements in all 4 of these that they're going to be talking about in their classroom.
So with lit circles, it creates a great partnership. Of course, Elizabeth talked about the cross-curricular aspect for, in this case, integrating science and English. And you can do that with a variety of other subjects. We have had it not only at the middle school level, we've seen this take place at the high school level before also, and it can go across more than just 2 subjects. Your media coordinator, if you're a educator in a school right now, is also another excellent resource for you. That's a great partnership. A lot of times they can come in and sometimes co-teach. They can help when the station rotation activities are going on, like the playlist format that Elizabeth shared just a little bit ago. They can be part of that rotation. You can see there's a link for implementation of Mad Scientists. I think Elizabeth put some great suggestions in there, because we know that sometimes when students are in groups, they don't always have the most fulfilling role, like the timekeeper or the note taker may not be the best. So there are some other roles here that students can fulfill that gives them an active participant role.
I'm trying not to laugh because I told Brittany the other day, I said, you know, I want to always be the timekeeper. Just let me just sit back, let someone else do the work, and I'll just say time. So again, these are just possible roles that she mentioned. So you see discussion director. And again, some of these might even be where you need to talk to the kids about this, obviously, because you don't want to just throw this out at them. But the word director is kind of a big word for them. But again, it's just that whole thing of you're trying to help make sure we're on the group discussion. Some kids do well with that, and some need a lot of modeling because they're just not quite sure how to lead that discussion. But boy, is that a great skill to have pretty much in any job, is how to talk to other people. Summarizer, I know in ELA we have to summarize all the time. I know in science sometimes with the articles, whether it's Achieve or Scholastic or something that you read from a scientific, notebook or magazine, you got to be able to summarize what you've read. Vocabulary enricher. This is someone who can actually look at the group to make sure we understand the vocabulary words. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, and that's okay. We, as teachers, need to know that so we can help you with understanding. Passage picker, sometimes this is like find those really important quotes that you're going to use or those important passages that you want to share or talk about or really draw attention to. Connector, I'm real big on trying to make connections with everything that we're reading. Like, I don't want to just read to be reading something for like study sync or my teacher made me. Like, I want to find a connection to my life, to the real world, to some kind of content we're talking about in class or another subject area. And then illustrator, I have a lot of kids that are really good with illustrations and visual representations, whether it's digital or whether it's on paper or paint or markers or pens or what have you. That's really, they can be really creative and show some type of visual representation. And then character analysis is really talking about those character motivations, whether the character is fictitious or not. Every story's got people in it. What's their role? What's their motivations? How are they developing or changing throughout the text? And then prediction maker. Can you predict what's getting ready to happen? Do you know what might happen in this next paragraph or this next chapter or this next passage? Again, these are just some possible titles you could pick versus those standard ones. And then when you have a moment, you can look down here at just some ideas that we have for implementing the effective lit circles in your classroom.
I will say, Elizabeth brought up a good point of modeling. So it does seem like a lot if you've never taken on this type of format for your classroom, whether it's the rotating stations or the playlist format, or they have a lot of different choices going on all at the same time. But I think modeling and then having your students experience this, would you say that your students adapted to this better after some practice with it?
Yeah, you have to have lots of practice because a lot of times the students are just used to, I hate to say it, but the get and sit where they just sit and get the information or give it back to you. I really need for them to be more active in their learning and also talking to me about what they're learning and again, finding those connections. So again, this is something you really definitely want to model. And also get feedback because it might be that we need to tweak something or maybe even come up with a role that they're finding that they need that I hadn't even thought about. Okay.
So going back to more ideas over on the right-hand column. So these are other ways that partnership with another person, whether it is another teacher or again, your library media coordinator, I can't advocate enough to use them and utilize them in a co-teaching method. They can help you with book selection. So if you're not exactly sure what might be a good fit for you and what you want to integrate, they can help you with that. Funding advocacy. So that could be at your school. They may know of a resource that you haven't thought about. Or we had an experience this summer where we didn't have funding at the moment, but we connected with our public library and they were willing to buy the resources and Elizabeth was able to check them out for another project.
Yes, that was fantastic. Please ask your public librarians for help, whether it's research, whether it's AI, book selection. I can't stress it enough, but just having them overhear a conversation, the next thing you know, they bought 6 different books for me that we're doing right now, a project. we pretty much wrapped it up. Now we're in the final stages where they are going to have a QR code with a Google slide with their recommendation of a book they read that's new for my local public library's Holocaust children's lit section. So it's kind of neat that they get to have a real world project and not just something to be graded by me.
It's actually going to be used and they're going to see the effect of that. That's awesome. Acquisition. So again, your school library media coordinator is used to working with the book companies that your school is able to purchase from. So they can help you with the purchasing process in that capacity. Book talks and book tasting. So there's a link there just for an explanation if you're unsure about what that means. But a book talk is just a short little blurb. You could have the teacher or the librarian interact and kind of give that short little blurb and advertise that book. Or at the end, as a project, you could have students create that. Just like Elizabeth said, she had her students helping out the public library and advertising the Holocaust books that they selected. A book tasting is similar to if you think about a meal tasting, if you were to rotate around again throughout the room and you would have books located at each station and you would be able to, again, have a sampling of the book. Maybe you read a little book blurb, you take a look at the cover, but that sometimes helps students to know if they have a choice in reading, what book they would like to select to read. Pathfinders, again, school library media coordinators are excellent with helping students find resources, maybe resources that connect to the book and the subject matter. If you're, say, integrating something like science, and then the science resources that would marry into your ELA book that you're getting ready to read. Bookmarks and quote walls are another excellent way for your students to come out with a project at the end so that they can advertise to, say, other students that may come into your school and want to read that book in the library, but also upcoming students to come into your classroom the next year,
Right.
or the next semester if you're in a high school possibly, so that you can introduce those books. And sometimes it's just when a student recommends another book to another student, the power of that is amazing.
Well, thanks, Brittany, for all of that explanation. And again, if you are lucky to have a media coordinator in your school, please use that person because they are a plethora of information. So we're going to go down to number 3. This is just one of many activities you can do. Again, for a virtual session like this, it's probably best to know if you're going to have a certain number of people so you can plan better. Obviously, this webinar, people are coming and going, but that's completely fine. This activity, Say the Last Word for Me, is something that I did with a former partner of mine, Dr. Amy Jo Spencer from NCAT. We did this quite a bit. But again, you can do this in any classroom. You can also do it in PD if you're only working with teachers. You can do it with any text. And really, you could even do it with a video if everybody has access to the same video. I find it personally best to do it in a room with people, but you can do this virtually. Again, you just need to know how many people you're going to have and just kind of prep for it. But Say the Last Word for Me is kind of the directions are kind of in the title. So I would say you're going to have an article to read or a video to watch. You're going to give people either like an index card, sticky notes, or again, a Google Doc if you want to do that. But they're going to basically read the article first or watch the video, and then they're going to write down 3 either quotes or a case of the video, 3 things they've heard as quoted. They're going to write that down. You can do 5 if you're working with older students, but I would say 3 is a safe bet for pretty much elementary or younger. But again, they're going to get that quote that's really important to them. And you want to have the 3 just in case while you're talking, someone has your quote. So then you can't say my quote was taken. You have another choice. So as I'm reading this text, and I have an example here, Edutopia article, Protocols to Build a Discussion Skills. So if you click that, that's the article we would use if we were all together in a room, or even right now, if we all had the head count for everybody in here, we could actually do a virtual circle. But you read the text, highlight the 3 things that are important to you. I have on the right-hand side where it says activity directions, I have a link for a Google Doc template. If you take that template, it will now be yours. And then what you do is you would copy and paste the quote there if you're doing virtual, or you would just type or write again, depending on what you're doing. So if I had an index card, I would just write. And then you need to make sure that you know how you feel about it. Like, what are your thoughts about it? Well, how does it make you react? You know, positive, negative. You're going to tell the card because you're going to tell the group in a moment. So you put all that down, again, your quote and how you feel about it. And then when you get in your group, somebody is going to start. And usually it can be the person who has the earliest birthday or the tallest person. Or again, you have a head count 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number one's going to go first. Again, however you want to start it off. That person is going to say, okay, my quote from the text is, and they're going to say the quote. Once that quote's been said, this is the hardest part, even for adults, you got to be quiet. Like, you've got to be quiet for a few moments. And then everybody else on your team, whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face, they're going to have a moment to share. Now, sharing could be on virtual through the chat comment. It could be unmute and share. It could be in a breakout room and we share. It can look a variety of ways. But again, you got to have that safe space and you got to have all those protocols and everybody understands the rules. Again, in a room, I would have kids at a table. They're going to share out and then they're going to wait. So then, for example, let's say there's 4 people in a group. One person shared. Now person 2, 3, and 4 are going to talk about it and think about why they think that quote's important. Like, you know, well, that quote was a good quote because, and they'll state their reasons why. Once everybody's kind of had a moment to discuss, and we're just talking like a few minutes here, then the person who shared the quote has the last word. They say, the reason why I chose the quote is, and they tell you why, and now they're done, on to the next person. So then person 2 is going to share their quote, wait, and again, the cycle is going to go where everybody talks about it. Then that person will again have the last word, state why. So that way the adults or the students, depending on who you're working with, everybody gets a chance to share. Everybody gets a chance to listen and everybody gets a chance to discuss. So you're doing a lot of different things at the same time, but also you're sharing information and you're learning from each other as you're talking about a text. And it might even be, hopefully, if you're lucky, someone shares something you really hadn't thought about. And now you can see that connection. So again, you can do this with all different grades. If I was working with younger folks, like probably, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th, who are just starting to kind of read or watch videos, again, I would do no more than 3. And it might just be pick 2. But the main thing is you want to make sure that they have enough choices in case someone else states theirs, because we don't want to have drama. If your quote got chosen, you got another one to choose from. Anything you want to expand upon, Brittany, on this?
I just think it gives students the ability to connect and then express their thoughts. And so that's powerful. And then the rotation method, they all have an opportunity to speak. So they're all going to participate.
Right. So please understand our directions here on the right is looking at like a virtual group. So again, you can tailor this document because now you're the owner of it. But again, if you're virtual, make sure you have those protocols in place and everybody knows what the rules are. I would say it would work very well in a breakout room. I've been successful in that in the past. But again, I just personally like the live face-to-face discussion because again, you can get a little bit more with the body language and the facial expressions. Now, underneath the extra resources from Edutopia, just so you know, these came from the site when we got this article, Thinking Pathways. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's just basically this micro lab. We are not shopping right now, but the micro lab protocol. So again, it just talks about different things you can do. So you might want to take a look at this and just see if any of these steps work for you. Again, this was a resource link from the Edutopia article. The other one is here. Let's see. This is the micro lab protocol. I really like this one as well. Groups of 4. There's that timekeeper. But the 4 questions in 60 seconds where you have a round 1, person 1 answers, then 2, then 3, then 4. Then round 2, person 2 answers, then 3, 4, 1. It just kind of goes from that. And then we're also having that listening only and then also speaking. And then it just kind of gives you ideas of different things you can do, like key quote, key character, key plot point, key symbol. So I like that. And again, Edutopia had that link in the article as well. Concentric circles. This was from Facing History, really good website. They had a lesson here, grades 6 through 12. Again, you can always modify this however you need, but you can look at this concentric circle discussion. It's a different kind of strategy to also have class participation. It gives you the lesson plan here. So you can take a look at that and see if you like that strategy as well. The main thing is just to get kids having discussions and actually talking versus the teacher doing all the talking.
And some of these could be done as a whole class activity for discussion, but you may also use them as a part of the station rotation. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So discussion rubrics, this is just an example of what Edutopia had linked as well. These were some pretty good ones. Of course, you might want to tweak it again for younger students or maybe even for older. It really depends. But you have things such as, argument and context, quotation, analysis, and you would just put things such as consistent, approaching, or developing. And then this option for discussion was like insight, being specific, making those connections. Again, I know when I first saw this, it gave me some really good ideas moving forward to use for the rubrics for my own students. Okay, so say the last word for me. I can't highly recommend it enough. I used it quite a bit. I'm still using it, and it's really, really helpful. And if the kids struggle at first, again, just keep modeling, keep that practice going, because they need this. They need to learn that wait time. They need to learn patience, particularly in the 21st century, because we're all about fast and furious. Okay. So let's see. Lit Circle wrap up. This is where basically, if you're in the room with us, we would love to get your feedback on this Padlet here. There's a link, and we have some questions here. And you want to go over the questions, Brittany, from the Padlet?
We've shared a variety of resources today from the playlist method. If you plan to possibly use some type of cross-curricular activity, maybe the discussion hit home with you just a minute ago, or if you plan to involve your media coordinator, if you have one in your lesson planning. So what do you plan to use? That would be the first question there. And then if you do plan to partner with somebody at your school, in the second question, who would you partner with, and how can you utilize these techniques in that role with partnering? And then the last one, any additional ideas, thoughts, or questions? We're kind of using this space to get feedback from people, but also to share ideas. We're huge on sharing ideas with not only with each other, because we don't work in the same building now, but also across our county and then with other people in our state. So we think that if you have a fabulous idea, we would like to hear about it, because it might be powerful in our classrooms.
For sure, absolutely. So again, if you're here with us, we would love for you to fill out the Padlet and get some ideas about how you might use this. Now, the very, very last part here, this is like, I don't know, your holiday treat, so to speak. There's a lot of resources here that are ready to go. Brittany, if you're okay, I'm going to let you talk about the EBSCO ones.
Sure. So we talked about DFIT to start with here. We talked about putting in an idea or something that you're already working on. And then Elizabeth also highlighted that if you have a YouTube video that you love for your classroom and your content, to throw that in there. But another thing that we can take a look at is PDFs and text articles. So maybe you already have some that you utilize, but another place, if you are in North Carolina Public School, is that you have access to resources through EBSCO and Britannica. In our case, they are in our NC Ed Cloud. So when students log in there, or staff members, they have the ability to search EBSCO. There are 2 videos there that just briefly show you how to search for specific publications. You may not be aware, but through those purchases through the state of North Carolina, you have access to a lot of academic journals and magazines and news articles that live right there available to your students. And so those are some just quick videos to show you how to utilize those. And then you can use those to put them into DFIT, especially those PDF versions of articles, to get resources out. So they will create those graphic organizers for you, or they'll pull out that vocabulary and create multiple choice questions for you.
All right. Thanks, Brittany. And then underneath DFIT, and again, that was the first resource I showed you, and I was kind of typing in about the lottery by Shirley Jackson. Majority of these links are actually from a former student of mine who, this was his senior project, if you all remember, and I'm really dating myself by saying that, but back when our state was pushing the research project, the senior project for graduation. So these are still relevant today, and I actually still use my former students' materials. So this is step-by-step instructions for book talk. So if you click this, it will go to a link where the student has got here for you pretty much everything you would need for book talks. And he was actually doing this back at McMichael when Brittany was a media coordinator and I was his English teacher, but he also was trying to get history teachers to use this and the biology teacher to use this, because again, just trying to see that cross-curricular connection. But if you look here, you have the prepping material step by step. You have the getting started. You have the first small group talk meeting, projects. So again, I would really encourage you, when you have a moment, just take a look at this document. You can download it. If you do use it though, just please give Joey credit, because he spent a lot of time on this project. But again, you can always modify this to fit your needs, but this is just the step-by-step that he had made for his project. Student reading survey. So these questions could obviously be put in different formats now. You could put this in, like we use Canvas. This could be a Canvas, quiz that's not graded. This could be a Google form. This could be a lot of different things, but basically this is kind of getting to know your students, like describe yourself as a reader. How you like to use your spare time? What type of books do you like to read? How much time do you spend reading? Name some of your favorite authors and books. What's interesting to me is questions like this years ago, I had more answers. Nowadays, we're not reading as much. So the survey has definitely changed coming back into the classroom, that's for sure.
It has, and it's important to find out through a survey or just conversations with your students what they're interested in, to make those connections for reading. And again, going back to, sometimes they can make connections for each other, because once they've read a book and it's powerful for them, they are sometimes your first people to go out and advertise.
Absolutely. This example unit plan, again, was really a big part of Joey's project. And of course, there's your name, Brittany. But we just basically took his idea and ran with it for the mad scientist. So Nicole Fraser, who's my science teacher, she is the 8th grade lead here, and we called ourselves the mad scientist just to kind of have some fun with it. But basically, we're going to be doing lit circles and doing all these different activities to show the English side of it, the writing side of it, the language side, also the science standards. Do some hands-on things as well to show those connections. I know the science teachers are just really excited to have that support. And again, I'm lucky to have a school that supports me having some flexibility to do things like this. And our media coordinator is going to help as well. So the books have been ordered. It's just a matter of us getting in our teams and start the actual lit circles, which we plan to do right after Thanksgiving. We'll start our first one. But this just shows you pretty much everything you can think of. This is the old school Intel lesson plan, but I did like it because it made me really think carefully. And also Joey, when he was doing his for biology and world history, it makes you think very carefully about things, and like your essential question and then your unit question, like what's your focus for that actual unit? And then also your content, like those specific questions that can be answered a lot of times from Google, or again, just reading the actual text. And then you have timeline, assessments, any kind of prerequisite skills, and then your procedures. And again, you guys can spend some time looking at that because it's there for you. Membership grid. You can make this on anything. This was just, again, an old one that was made by Joey, but you could put your topics there and your group members, and they can use this grid, and you can use this grid as well, just to kind of keep track of who's who in the group and what are we actually focusing on overall. Book list ballot, I just used the ones that you saw at the very beginning. So we use cores for our classes instead of, periods. So again, I like to know which one they want to read first. More than likely, they're going to read all 4, hopefully, but time, we just never know. But I definitely want to get kind of who's in who wants to read what first. So we're trying to get our first and second choices. So again, we will just go from there. Then the e-circle checklist, it's just things that you can give. Again, this was from Intel that Joey kind of modified, but do you have your theme or topic? Have you written down your ideas? Have you brainstormed? Again, what's your project going to be? Because I want all the kids to do some kind of creation with this. When they're done, I don't necessarily want a book report. I don't necessarily want a bunch of quizzes, because again, they're going to be doing different types of assessments along the way. I want to have some kind of fun, meaningful project to get kids discussing books, to get kids reading, and to get my kids to have the other grade levels want to read too. So get them in the library and go book shopping, so to speak. And then last but not least, book reflection. Again, this can be put on anything else besides a Google Doc if you want to use something else, but just kind of seeing how they reflect on this project. What have they learned? What was the hardest part? What was the easiest part? How could they make it better? And I get a lot of feedback from that because it just helps me make projects better, because I'm real big on reflecting on how to make things better for all and how to improve myself and make sure I'm being clear, because as Dr. Brene Brown says, being clear is being kind, and I want to be kind. So anyway, I see a couple of comments in the chat. So that's pretty much our presentation. You have our names, you have our emails. So please feel free to email us any questions, but let's go to the chat here and see what we got. Yep. Okay, I think we're all good. So thank you so much for coming to our session. And Brittany, anything you want to say, final thoughts?
Just thank you for spending your time with us today, and hopefully something that you found today resonates with you. If we can be of help to you in any way, please reach out to us.
Yes. Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming and supporting NCTIES. And we will see you hopefully next time. Take care.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Elizabeth and Brittany, for being such fantastic presenters.
Well, thank you. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thank y'all.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.